Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Marc Portney is an American entrepreneur, investor, and business advisor. His street-smart insights and deep knowledge in the retail landscape are invaluable when assessing the commercial viability of new products. As president of Globalsource Infrastructure Partners, an international player in product development, manufacturing, and sales, Portney works diligently to bring new products to market. With over 30 years of experience, his street-smart insights, body of contacts, and expert knowledge of the retail landscape enable him to lead Globalsource Infrastructure Partners and its affiliates from concept to store shelf. He also heads a group of venture capitalists who participate in any size deal that he feels is worthy. In 2014, he was chosen as host and resident investor on Disney Science Channel's new series, All American Makers. Each week, the show features four amateur inventors eager for the opportunity to take their product to market. Each inventor's product was shown to consumers, broken down, and examined to test their mettle and ultimate marketability. Marc and his team of savvy experts then decide if any of the inventions merit financial investment. Marc, in so many ways, there's so many deals we can talk about. You've obviously been around for a while and you do a lot of great things. I really want to welcome you to the Deal Quest podcast.
I appreciate it. Let me start by asking about that long intro. Wow, that's a lot of stuff.
Well, listen, I always, I shorten some people's bios that they send me if they send me their educational, info and all this stuff. But everything in there was relevant to deals. So I wanted to get it out there so our audience, gets a feel for who you are. But Listen, before we get to any of that, whether it's the investment deals, whether it's, off air or on air, apparently, whether it's the procurement, whether it's, I know you do some licensing. I want to take you back first, though, when you were a little kid, 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be growing up? Because my guess is somebody who runs a company that helps people with procurement and somebody who's a VC investor probably wasn't it at that age, but you.
I got the bug really, really early. I figured out that for 25 cents, I can shine a pair of my father's shoes. So if I can shine one pair, I can shine 10 pairs. I saved up my money to get one of those wooden boxes where you put your foot on it. So that was in real business. Then I would wait for my grandparents to come over and I used to bang them for a shoe shine. So, and this was all super, super young. But just the feeling, that feeling of working for what you're getting and then keeping the money was your own, stuff like that. You're old enough like I am to remember a paper route. I used to not only have a paper route when I was a kid, I had 2 other kids in 2 other streets doing it, and they were doing it under me, and I was taking a cut of their paper route. Nobody could even understand what I was doing. And then I would go to the guy that pulled up in the station wagon, and I would give him the vig for all 3 routes, but I would give those kids, you can keep your tips, but, you're going to give me X. And then I used to, it started super young, man, super.
I love it. We have that in common. Listeners of the show know that, I was a hustler as well when I was younger. And then at age 15, I used to deliver flyers door to door when I was 13 or 14 for like a company. And I got my own accounts and I hired my friends. And I literally became the crew chief, although, who's usually an older kid who drove. But I rode around on my bicycle checking up on my friends who were delivering flyers, and I paid them X and charged
very similar.
X plus, right? Yeah.
Very similar.
Great. Look at one other question looking back. What was your first deal of any type that you can remember? It could be something young when you were a kid or early in your career. Just any deal that's memorable.
I mean, I can go back and tell you a fun little story. I can give you the real deal that I did at 20 years old, which was a leveraged buyout. I can go there. So I'll start with a quick one. My brother's a chubby kid, a big chubby kid, right? So my grandparents used to come over and visit from Regal Park, Queens, and they used to bring a pound of chocolate lollipops and a $5 bill for each kid. There was 3 of us. So my brother would get his lollipops and his 5. Back then, 5 might as well been 500. You know what I mean? You're talking about, 50 years ago, like that, 55 years ago, maybe. So my brother would gobble up the chocolate like in 2 seconds, right? And of course, I would take mine and put them in my bottom drawer. And my grandparents would come, visit, kisses, hugs, goodbye. And then they were all done. And then they left. And my brother was like, "Hey, what are you doing with those chocolate lollipops?" I was like, "Dude, they're mine. They're mine." So he goes, "Well, can I have one?" I go, "I'll sell you the whole thing." He goes, "How much?" I said, $5. Right. So every time my grandparents came, my brother would eat 2 pounds of chocolate and I would get $10. So that was the beginning of me figuring out that there was a supply and a demand and a price for that supply. I know it's a stupid little story, but it's really indicative of what I've become later on in life, So he didn't give a shit. He didn't care about the $5. He just wanted that. He wanted the merchandise.
Right.
To put it into, so.
I love it. I love it. So listen, let's use that as a segue and we can get back, and talk about that early other deal that you talked about a little later. But since you mentioned this early procurement, and I'm starting to understand the value of goods, and let's jump into the core of, what your business does. We gave a little bit of in the bio, but talk a little bit more about who you serve, and what you do and what the model is like.
Sure. So I own a company named Globalsource Infrastructure Partners, and we're a sourcing outfit. Close to the show, All American Makers, a few years back, I get a lot of submissions to Marc Portney.com. So we take those submissions, and then I probably look around 2,000 submissions. I probably only invest in 1 or 2 a year. That's the ratio of deals to submissions. So just so you know, but Globalsource Infrastructure Partners can, once they have a prototype, develop the packaging and all of that stuff. I have factory relationships. We have a payroll in China, and the factory owners actually fly in for my kids' weddings, and they've stayed in my house for holidays. But, that's pre-pandemic, obviously, but
sure.
That's the kind of relationships that I have over there. So we take people and we find their goods. We find the least expensive way to manufacture it and protect it and make sure that it's not it gets in the wrong hands. And then we bring it in and we do that over and over and over again. I've had clients for as much as 30 years. I've been doing this for about 35. And it's anything from components all the way through to, we've done blood pressure monitors. I've done RV cables. There's no difference in anything, any treatment that we work in, glass, ceramic, plastics. We do it, and that's what we do. And we take the sourcing away and all of the shipping and the customs and the duties. We give them a DDP price right to their back door, which is delivery duty paid, DDP. With the last year's debacle in the supply chain, there was a lot of people that were like, "Please take this away from me now." So that really put a nice pop into our model, because we changed our model from we'll find it for you, you bring it into, we'll do the door-to-door service. Don't even think about it. They love it. And that's really a big change in the past, I'd say 18 months.
Yeah. And so, that's a great entrepreneurial example of, pivoting a model to address what the market needs. Right. I love that. I love that story. I think every smart business person does that. And I'm sure you were, one of the things I've talked about, at least, was talking about a lot more early, a little while back is the impact of the pandemic on companies. And I think the best description of it was this conversation of a K economy, where there were certain industries that were in the upswing of the K and some that were down. And I probably never seen any economic condition that had such a split we happen to do a lot of stuff. We were fortunate as well in that we have a lot of clients in financial services and tech, in a lot of other industries that did really, really well. We have a lot less in like restaurants and retail, which obviously got hurt. Certainly logistics, distribution, importing, anything on the supply chain side. If you could solve, issues, I mean, that was huge, right? With all.
Well, let me give you one other thing we do that would resonate with your listeners is the fact that we deal with a lot of PE firms, and before they go and once they're doing their discovery, a lot of them do quality of earnings check, but very few of them do quality of cost of goods. So we'll have a PE firm contact us. We go in, we look at their widgets. We'll just call them widgets for this story.
Sure.
And we find out, listen, we can save you 20% on that widget. So they do the deal based on the current numbers.
Yep.
And then after they purchase the company, we get the call to bring in the goods at a 20% discount. And like everyone, that drops right to the bottom of the P&L. There's no overhead that has to do with that. And boom, it falls straight to the bottom. But they bought the company on the basis of the higher COGS.
And listen, that's what does any buyer, whether it's a PE buyer or, a strategic buyer or an individual buyer, always what you want to happen in a deal like that is for you to recognize the opportunity for additional value, whether that's on the expense saving side, whether that's on the increasing the revenue side that the current owner, hasn't been able to realize or hasn't figured out. And it's not like you're trying to pull anything over. It's like, you're going to pay them on the value they created, not on the value you can create, going forward.
But they pulled me in so that to the victor goes the spoils.
Sure,
the
exactly.
The existing owner was doing what he was doing. These guys are slick enough to bring me in and go, hey, worst thing that happens is that they're sourcing it properly. Now we can go forward knowing that they're doing the right thing. But the other thing that can happen is there could be a monster savings. We did this for a lot of Amazon aggregators. I don't know how familiar you are with those spaces, but there's aggregators that go and buy all of these individual Amazon, let's just call them stores.
Yes.
So before they make those purchases, I'm able to tell them just what the value is. We had a whiteboard once. The guy was costing him $275 a piece. I got on the call. I said, "Oh, so when was the last time you were in China?" He says, "That's funny. I've never been to China." All of a sudden, the alarm bells start going off in my head. I kept my mouth shut because I'm paid to keep my mouth shut until it's time. Turns out we got that same board for about $195. So that was an extreme situation. But the guy had never been to China. He's buying off of a website. They're having their way with him, whatever it is. And the bottom line is these guys were smart enough to call me in and say, "What does this look? Bring it to your people. Let's see." And they're saying, sometimes it's unbelievable. They'll say to me, "Is it the same item?" I'm like, "No, guys. It's the same item. I promise. There's just not 4 people in between."
Right.
Right.
So. Right. And listen, and that's true in so many products, right? The closer you can get to the source. And listen, all the clients that I've had over the years who are, in any business, right? Any widget, whatever you want to talk about, that's made overseas, have either personally spent or work with somebody trusted who personally has spent years and years and a lot of time in that particular country, whether that's China, Vietnam, Philippines, whatever it is, right? Because, listen, on the one point, we're talking about something that eventually ends up in the sales, of goods and services for that particular person, which is not the topic of what we talk about. That's the organic growth side. But the deal side, in addition to we'll get to the investment stuff. I mean, the ability to cut deals with manufacturers, right? With distributors, with anybody in that supply chain, those are crucial deals and relationships that you've built is what, that is what allows you to bring the value that the other people can't bring, right?
Long term, though, they're very, very long term relationships. And listen, They come to the United States, we spend time. I don't have to spend time with them in the United States, but I bring them into my home. We share holiday customs with them. I mean, it's crazy. And then I used to go 4 or 5 times a year for all those years. And that's obvious for me to visit factories, FaceTime and all that stuff. But this stuff doesn't, it just doesn't pop out of your ass. I mean, that you have to you have to build longevity and long-term relationships to have that type of Rolodex, especially in another country, you know?
Yeah. So Mark, let's actually fill a gap here because, we talked about your very early lesson on, on sourcing when you, and swimming in value on the chocolates when you were a kid. And now we've jumped to this amazing business you've bought with this long-term relationships you have. How did you even get into this? How did you get there? What made you go into this area, and how did you form some of those early key relationships? Obviously now, I don't want to say it's easy. Every business takes work, but I mean, now you're established. Now those relationships are established. You have, but getting those relationships established in the beginning is the tough part. So how'd you get into it in the first place?
Well, I started in the floral business. That's where I started. So as a young kid, I started just sweeping the floors in a flower and plant shop. That's what I did. I mean, it doesn't sound sexy, but my father got divorced and had nothing to do with us on the weekend while he looked for girls. So that being the case, I went and got a job. So and that's what I did. From there, I worked in a much larger place. I went from $1 to $2 an hour. I was going crazy, man. The guy doubled my pay. It was unbelievable. Right. So that was that. And then I worked in that until I was about 20 years old, all the way from 15, like that.
Okay.
And then he was having trouble with the New York corporation, and he came to a meeting once and he said, I have to find a buyer for this New York corporation. I'm underwater, 300 grand. I'm on the lease personally, and I need to find a buyer. So I was like, okay. And I sat there and I thought, I sat him down and I said, listen, I got a buyer for you. He says, oh, really? That's fantastic. I said, it's me. He goes, you're 20 years old with an old pair of tennis sneakers. What are you going to do? So I said, listen, I'll give you about $6,000 or $7,000 a month. This was in the 80s. It was like a fortune of money. I said, I'll give you the $6,000 or $7,000 a month, and I'll agree to buy the merchandise from you and pay a 10% over for your service.
Okay.
He said, you know what? You're just crazy enough to be able to do this. So I signed personally. It didn't matter. I wasn't even married yet. My wife thought she was marrying an accountant, and now she was going to marry some sea slug that was going to be in retail, So anyway, make a long story short, I took it over. The first year I went from 300 loss to 300 profit. I just worked 9 to 9, 7 days a week, and just never looked up. And that's how that worked. So that kind of worked out. And then I moved on from it's funny, the landlord was getting $25,000 a month at the time. And I went to him and I said, listen, at the end of this lease, I mean, you make more than a partner would. If you don't become reasonable, I'm going to leave. He was like, yeah, okay. But lease came, and I told him, that's that. And so we moved on. It was painful emotionally, but I had to do it. I made my money. I moved on. I met this company in Brooklyn, New York. They were doing 100 grand. So they said, we'd love to talk to you. Also in the floral business, connect.
Okay.
So they said, well, we have this business. We'd love you to take it over. So I said to them, okay, how about 100 grand? They were like, 100 grand? You're nuts. We only do 100 grand. Our other company makes a lot of money, but not this one. So let's just agree to disagree. Let's think about it. Come back next week. Well, I wasn't working, and I wasn't working for about 4 days. That was about 4 days too many for me. So I went back to him. I said, listen, I came up with an idea. I said, I want a piece of the top line. You can have the first 100. They were like, okay. They were like a cat that ate the canary because there was nothing in it for them. So there was no exposure. If I sold it, I ate what I killed. Right? So why not? In the meantime, I built the company to well over $10 million in 3 years. Took a piece of the top. I was making FU money. And then, so that's how that happened. But that company imported supplies, floral supplies.
Okay.
Everything in the flower shop that didn't die. I already knew about it. The part I didn't get was the importing part. I didn't know anything about it. So I was watching this guy import. And He would never take me to China because he was scared, and rightly so. So not that I'm dishonest, but, I want to learn everything. I was young. I wanted to suck all the information in, and lo and behold, I saw how it worked. I saw what the timeline was. I saw how he communicated. I started to see everything the way that he was doing it.
Yeah.
And then, and that's was my first taste of the import portion of the deal. So that's how I learned about the importing.
Love it. So then what did you like? When did you first go over to China and start establishing relationships there?
Well, the relationships I was forming at that other company, I was starting to form those. So I had some relationship there at the time because they would come in and you would have to go to dinner and tea, even here you have to do it, So but the guy that owned that company, he was my partner in that company. He didn't understand that the differential in cultures. They eat light, they eat lightly. He was taking them to Jewish deli and giving him a corned beef sandwich. The guy was sick for 3 days after that. It was like eating a cannonball. What are you doing? But that's what he would do. And then the guy wouldn't show up for 2 days. So sorry, sick in my room. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? So there's a culture difference too that you have to be respectful of and understand that people don't eat like American. What I mean? We're a special crew when it comes to eating, but I started to make those relationships. And then some of those relationships I carried on to my company. And that was a few decades ago.
Got it.
And that's how that whole thing started. So I would take them and we would eat lightly and have a nice time. And then they weren't sick and I could have 3 days out of them versus one day of business and 2 days of sending Pepto-Bismol to their
Right. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. So let's talk. How did you come to start making investments? Were you investing before the show, or was the show really the kickoff of it? Talk about that and what you did.
Well, I really wasn't. I mean, I was investing in my own companies.
Yes,
that was that type of investment, but it really started with the show All American Makers. Around the world, it's called Invent It Rich. So I always know where the show is showing because I'll wake up to 20 submissions from Croatia and I'll be like, oh, I guess they showed it in Croatia yesterday.
Right.
So I get it. But it really started with that because then I realized like, if I can take a piece of a company and use my skills to expand it and increase it and blow it up, then I would get, it would be 4 pieces, even though smaller, but 4 pieces all working at the same time. I already knew what I was doing in the sourcing part. I was doing in the sales and marketing. I already knew all that stuff. They had no exposure. I had the exposure. So that's what started off by having people then submit their items or their deals to Portney.com. And then I would take a look at them. But I'm very picky. I told you that ahead of time. I mean, maybe I look at 2,000 deals. A lot of them are way, way, way too early.
Sure.
And then some of them make sense. And then I'll license 1 or 2 that I want to, that I really want to take over the finish line that I think have like a really, really good chance of building and then maybe even selling it off. So that's how that whole investment thing started.
Got it. All right. So I want to get to talk about how you do those deals and licensing, but let's take a step back. How did the show come about? How did they approach you? Like, how did the show come about?
It's a really funny story because my daughter signed up for a TV show in her high school. And then when the different show, and when the executive producers called the house, they got me, and I'm a little bit animated and a little bit aggressive. So they were like, who is this? And I was like, you called me. Who's this? So then they were like, oh, we got to come interview this guy. This guy's crazy. Right. So I mean, I'm trying to hold it in for the podcast because it's a family show. So, but at the same time, so that's what started to happen. And then the executive producers knew me from that. And then they came up with this concept. It was for Science Channel, but Discovery Science. So like it was big brand. It was a big brand. So it was kind of like a kinder, gentler Shark Tank for nerds, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So on Shark Tank, if you don't have sales, you don't really have a good chance of getting the deal, right? On this show, you came in, you made a claim, and 2 science guys tested your claim. After they tested your claim, so if you said something that, it chilled a beer to 20 degrees after 5 minutes, well, be careful with your words. We're going to test it out. So we did that. And then they came back, they reported to the boardroom, and then we talked about it. This guy's full of shit because that beer was, 80 degrees. It didn't go anywhere near it, right? Okay, well, listen, dude, you got to go home because, you lied. So one of them have to go. Then we took the items after they went through testing and we put them in front of a real live focus group. Okay, this is this left-handed widget. It's $19.99. We used to sit in the green room with the inventor and watch the responses, which drove them crazy because that was their baby.
Sure,
right?
Of course.
We take the real response. We'd have them, give it a mark from 1 to 10, 1 being terrible, 10 being the best thing that I've ever seen. And then we tallied that, but I still didn't even have to listen to that. I could take a 10 and tell them to go home because it was my money. Right. So, but anyway, I used it as a guide, kind of what people would like. And then from there, we went to a round where we fixed problems that came up in the focus group. And then from there, we went to a deal round, which means I could invest in 1 of them, none of them, 10 of them, whatever it was. And it was totally up to me. And that basically was the show. So it appealed to the nerd who wanted to see how does that work, the makings, the chemical makeup or whatever that item was, or the businessy type people who wanted to see, am I going to give them a deal and how's that going to go down?
Love it. All right. So let's say, we're talking about the 2 out of 2,000 or whatever that come through, and make it through your vetting now. You mentioned licensing. So talk to me a little bit about how you do these deals. We don't need any obviously specific information on a given deal, but what's the licensing structure? How do you do these deals?
Well, the licensing structure is that, they have to be, willing, ready, willing, and able, because they're going to be giving up control. They're going to be giving up, I'm going to do everything from soup to nuts, and then I'm going to give you a royalty. Yeah. And that's the general structure of the deal. So I took on a pillow that was patented. Okay. And my attorney says, there's no way you got a patent on a pillow. I said, well, read it and weep, dude. There it is. So he's like, wow, pretty cool. So we took that and now we're just about ready to launch it, probably a couple of weeks more, but it's been a long, grueling process because COVID just smashed it. Smashed. Everything that we had in place just got smashed, but now it's really taken on a life of its own. We have manufacturing out of Mexico. We have 15 of the largest hospitality groups really interested in this thing. And we've got the funding. We've got the people in place. We're ready to turn. Then we're going to do that. We're going to take it direct to consumer, which we're specialists at. We can get this in front of anyone that fits a certain demographic. So, and the pillow is a really wide demographic. It's not like a tool or something else. So, and then that's what we'll do. So we'll fill the DTC and the direct to consumer and we'll do the hospitality. And then last but not least, once it's got real traction, we'll back into the big box retail aspect of it. And then we'll bundle it up into a nice little package and sell the shit out of it. That's what we're going to do. And that's what I hope I answered the licensing question.
No, definitely. It's funny. I was thinking that people are obviously, a lot of people obviously familiar with Shark Tank. And, my joke would be that you were the Kevin O'Leary, right? He's always the licensing guy, but he's looking more to license it to other people on behalf of, right?
But he's also a royalty guy.
Yeah.
He likes to receive a royalty.
Yeah. He likes a stream of money coming in, right?
That's what he likes. And he likes 3 times his investment back right away. So, and listen, you got to tip your cap to the guy. I'm a big Shark Tank fan. I really am.
So am I.
This was this was not a knockoff. So this wasn't really like it. It was more science heavy.
Yes.
The deal was secondary, if we're being totally honest. The deal was secondary. The science was primary because of the network that it showed on, but it
Right.
still had somebody like yourself was a business guy, maybe not so sciencey. You would still watch it because it was interesting as hell to see what's he going to do with this one. I wouldn't do it. Maybe he will. Let's see. That type of stuff.
Interesting. Good stuff. So let's talk about how it's interesting because a lot of folks, when they're evaluating investing in a company, let's say they're just, they're a financial investor as opposed to a strategic investor, right? They're looking at a lot of, we've had those kind of folks on the show as guests, and, they'll talk about the factors that they look at, whether it's, historical financial projections going forward, what the opportunity is. We talked about sort of this gap between, where generally investor wants to think that they have some better way, right? Some way they could either raise revenue or reduce expenses going forward. But you play you want to talk about strategic investing. You take these things over, you play a very different role. Because you get to not only bring capital to the table to buy these folks out and then give them a royalty back, but you are actually taking on stuff that is in the wheelhouse of what you do, every day. So, how do you, obviously the easy answer would be that you pick, products and companies that you think you can blow up, but give us a little more detail on how you analyze that.
It's 100% strategic. I'm not an investor that throws money into something and then watches it happen.
Right.
It's gotta coincide with my core competencies. If it coincides with my core competencies, then it's almost, I won't say no brainer because that's a little too extreme, but it's a no brainer. Right. Because it's just, I know, and nobody else knows what I know that's looking at the deal. So I know what I can do. I know that this is a metal item. This is powder coated metal. Oh my God, I can crush this, right? So, and then looking at the basic financials, I can understand that what they think those financials look like don't look anything like that because I crush those financials and really know it. I don't think it. I know it because I have the wherewithal to actually send my people into the factories, take a look at this, even before I do the deal, just like I do for the PE firms. So that's really a big factor in the way I do it and why I do what I do. I didn't know shit about pillows, to be honest with you, but I do know the rest of the chain and I willed back into it and I did. And in this case, China was not the best man for the job because of the freight quotient. So what did I have to do? I had to pivot and I went to Mexico, and where it's very good manufacturing, but the freight quotient is pulled out. So now there's margin to be had. So that's, I hope I answered the question, but that's the things I look at.
No, absolutely. And it's, I would guess, listen, it's very interesting because when you look at, let's say, PE firms, right, who obviously you help, be successful in terms of leveraging these opportunities. But in general, the ratio of investments that work out for PE firms, right, is very, they're, basically if you speak to any, or I remember there was a guy that we had at an EO event, entrepreneurial organization event in New York many years ago from the London School of Economics that did a whole analysis, right? And basically, this is, rough, but what it comes down to for most PE firms is that they have either their individual investments or funds, right? Out of their, the ratio is that 7 out of 10 investments return 0. 2 out of 10 investments make them some money, but they're not home runs, and they have one home run. The one home run makes up for all the other 9, certainly 7 to 9 investments that they otherwise have. I'm guessing, based upon the strategic nature of what you do and the pickiness that you have and the value that you could add, that your ratio has got to be a hell of a lot higher, right? It's a successful investment.
It's way better than that. And I can't tell you along those lines how many friends I have that have sold their companies to PE firms and then give me a call back and go, Mark, I got to go back in. It's a bomb. And I'm like, told you, man. I told you. The problem is, and I don't want to get letters from PE firms, so kiss my ass ahead of time. But then, you just can't throw money at something and think that it goes away. People that see it on paper aren't the people that roll up their sleeves and break their ass. I'm sorry. And I know we're going to get some letters and stuff, but I don't care because the bottom line is When you roll up your sleeves and get in there, which is what we do, then it's a way big difference than saying, oh yeah, let's acquire that for X million. Let's throw a little bit, let's throw this at it. And then that'll have, I can't tell you how many deals I've personally seen that shit the bed because all they thought was they're just going to throw money at it. And like you said, if all they're doing is pot shotting, then good for them. Their model probably works, but maybe you can do 3 or 4 out of 10 instead of 1 out of 10 looking for your home run. Maybe there could be 2 or 3 or 4 home runs and the rest of them shit the bed. That's fine. But that's just from what I've seen over the years. And they get them back and they're pissed off too, because they took the money, they run, and in their mind, they go on vacation, they're living a beautiful life, they check in every once in a while, and now they're back in the mix. Nothing's worse than being back in the mix after you got the taste of that relaxation life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially because for many of them, there's a good chunk of the money that is part of that purchase price that is back end that they're not going to get unless they go back in because the numbers aren't, because the earnout's not performing, right? So
they retain 20% of the company, and now to protect that 20, they got to go back in. They hold the secret sauce, right? So unless you kept them on for a good long time and drew the secret sauce out of them, you got nothing. You know what I mean? So now you got to bring him back in with his sauce and hopefully he'll salvage the thing, which he will, to protect this 20% that he left behind.
Yeah. No, totally. So, it's interesting. I just, you mentioned Queens, right? So you grew up in New York?
Yeah, I was born in Queens, and I've lived in New York my whole life.
So I'm a Brooklyn boy myself, and and I have a sense. I'm just curious, like in terms of where you are today versus, I was a hustler as a kid as well. But I'll just share my experience. I'm curious as to you on a sort of more personal level. To some extent, I was always hustling. I always figured, that I'd find a way. I mean, and I grew up with low middle class parents. We always had food on the table. We weren't poor, but we didn't. I mean, I didn't get on a plane till I was in law school, right? I didn't. We didn't go out to dinner. We ordered in Chinese food once in a while. That was a big treat. When my mother went back to work as a nurse, we were able to go up to the Catskills for a weekend, once a year, right? That was the big vacation. So I'm wondering, and I look at where I am now, and I'm like, wow, what a journey, a long way. Who would have thought, right? I'm wondering about your sort of thinking and journey and background, just in terms of where you've come, building such a successful company in this niche.
Very similar. The only time we went out to Chinese food is when my grandparents came over. So, the same grandparents with the lollipops and the fives. But that was the only time we really went out to dinner. It wasn't like that. We ate home. We played outside all day. That's it.
Yeah.
And your mother would just rat out to your father what you did all day, and you'd come home, and if you did 2 things, he'd beat your ass 2 times, So, I mean, that's where that's the way I grew up. So, you have this idea in your mind where you're going to be, and it's just never the same. I mean, you think you never feel successful. Yeah. I mean, this is just me talking personally. I'm very regular. I put my pants on one leg at a time, and I'm always thirsty, hungry for deals. I'm never going to retire. I just don't know what I would do. I don't have hobbies. I love this. Like what we're doing and chatting about what we're chatting about. This is like dirty talk to me. I love it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't see myself retiring, and I don't think that what I pictured when I was younger is even close to what I am today. Not a bad thing, but just, there's a reality and a perception, and they never meet. They always miss each other. So, I mean, that's just me, I
love it. It's it makes me think about 2 things about this podcast. I mean, one, there's a reason I always open it, saying, hey, whatever you're doing today, is amazing. But, I doubt, what did you want to be when you're 8, 10, 12 years old? Because I doubt it was that. Because it's almost, I mean, in over 200 episodes, I've had a couple of people who sort of are doing whatever they thought they were going to do at that age. It's almost never the case, right? So that's it's always interesting to me, and I think it's instructive for younger folks. And then also, like you said, I mean, I love what I do as well, right? So for me, we were talking to the pre-call on how much this podcast has taken off and become, top 1.5%, blah, 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 40,000 downloads a month. But if I still had 50 or 60 or 80 people listening to an episode, I'd still do this because I'm having fun, right? I love having these conversations, talking to amazing entrepreneurs and deal people about deals. And, for me, this is a blast. It's one of my favorite parts of the week. Fortunately, it's also taken off and become, a huge, great driver of business for me and build, great new relationships. But yeah, and I would never retire either,
But Corey, that's the fallout of what you're doing. You're not doing it for money or for deals or anything. You're doing it out of passion. What falls out of it is just plus. That's it.
That's 100% right. And it's an important distinction, right? Yeah. I mean, I launched this podcast because I thought, I didn't say, what is like the best marketing thing to drive more business to my law firm or to my consulting? No, that wasn't it. I just saw that so many companies spend all their time on organic growth. And listen, you have to figure out how to get customers and clients and get another one and get another one. You should be doing that. But
Sure.
So many fewer companies do some sort of inorganic growth, some sort of deal, right? And the ones that do, who grow on both organically and inorganically, are the ones that are even more successful. So really the trigger for this was, I think that there's so many more deal opportunities for companies. And I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care what size you are. I don't care if you have capital, you don't have capital. There's a way you can do a licensing deal, joint venture deal, strategic alliance, some sort of distribution deal, marketing deal, whatever it is, right? So that was my passion, to have people be more exposed to, to that and to shift their thinking. We talk about the mindset of a deal maker. Like, you're one of these guys like me that had an early mindset of an entrepreneur, and then, and the mindset of a deal maker is even different than that. And you had that as well. Other people don't always think that way. So yeah, that was my passion on why I did this. And you're right. Everything else that's come from it is not the reason I did it. It's the positive fallout from it.
Those are your best deals. You try to force something, it doesn't always happen. But when it falls into your lap because of a passion or something that you're doing, it's 1,000,000%. Like, I don't care if there's one person listening to us or 1,000,000 people listening to us, you're going to get the same answers out of me, and you're going to get the same attitude. I'm sorry. That's just who I am. This was a blast. This was a blast.
Love that. All right. Final two questions. The second to last question is just, where can people find out more about you and your company, and, if they want to find out more?
Well, there's two ways. One is globalsourceip.com. In other words, infrastructure partners, but it's globalsourceip.com. And if you want to reach out to me, I read all the submissions. Marc, M-A-R-C, markportney.com. That's markportney.com.
Love it. So, Marc, my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, my highest ideal, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from all people in the world, from oppression to the reason why I haven't had a boss in decades and, an entrepreneur. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
It's all I work for. I tell everybody, it's so funny you said the F word. The F word's freedom. And I work for freedom. I don't work for money. I never have, and I never will. If you're a pain in my ass, I'm throwing you out. And that's how I work, because you're a pain in my ass and you're going to impede on my freedom. It has nothing to do with money. How many pairs of pants am I going to wear today? Let's try one. How many watches I'm going to wear? One. Do I give a shit about fancy cars? Not really. Stick them in your ass. So I really work for the freedom to be able to do what I do. Another time, but we set up entrepreneurs for $5,000 to do a dealership on this Quick Survive. And I start the ad by saying bosses suck. That's the beginning of the ad. If I didn't get your attention with that, then I'll never get your attention. But bosses suck. Sorry.
Love it. Marc Portney, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Corey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.coreykupfer.com/dealden. That's coreykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.